existing business was so lucrative, they focused 100% of their resources on the existing business. Okay, and world changed, and they didn't have a product or a service to service this changed world. Okay, and that's how those companies kind of panic. Setting up a CVC is more a need of the corporate than the ventures who are wanting to raise funds. Okay, while it is easy to calculate the financial ROI, okay, how do you measure exactly the strategic ROI? The life of a CVC manager or setting up a CVC is actually a more complicated business.
Hello everyone, welcome back to TheCapitalNet TV. This is Rakesh, Bhatia again, hosting you on a very interesting conversation on corporate venture capital firms, CVC, which remains to be an important part of the venture investing world today, but still remains to be kind of an unknown and a mystery player when it comes to a lot of founders and other VCs and corporates and why they should be doing it. To have this conversation, we have with us a gentleman whose name is Rajesh Sharma. Rajesh happens to be one of the founding team members of perhaps the oldest corporate VC firm set up in India as part of the Times of India group. It's called the Brand Capital and the Springboard. He spent 25 plus years of his career in the venture capital and CVC world. In his current avatar, he advises the business houses to set up the corporate venture arms, help them set it up, help them define the strategy, and also guide them about the appropriate and the correct ways of structuring and running those businesses. How do you help and guide the businesses that you are working with today to arrive at that objective?
Good question again. So I'm saying first and foremost, they have to understand the reason and the importance why they are setting up this. Okay, it is essentially to future-proof their existence. Okay,
sure,
and grow their business. So corporates must understand this. Okay, see, in today's world, the growth ventures and the good ones in particular, they have a lot of options. Okay, money is available plenty. In fact, I would say today that setting up a CVC is more a need of the corporate than the ventures who are wanting to raise funds. Okay. Because the ventures who are raising funds today, they have multiple choices. Okay,
sure.
But the corporates do not have much choice in terms of how to grow.
Sure.
So it is their need more today than the need of the venture raising the fund to align to the CVC objective.
Sure. So now if we jump further into the structure of a CVC, right? A multiple LP versus single LP, do CVCs always bring the money from the balance sheet, or do they also get the external guys? Do they actually act as an LP as well, or do they just invest directly? I think there are a few other pieces of the structure which still remains unknown to a lot of people.
I think every CVC manager would love to have a consortium of investors, okay? Because it evens out the negotiating power, brings more objectivity, brings more transparency. Okay, but then if you go too much on that direction, then a corporate can anyways go and invest money in financial funds now, right? So from a corporate's perspective, normally it would be one LP. So they would want to have a dedicated CVC completely aligned to their strategic objectives, So they would not prefer their CVC entity to have 2-3 different stakeholders, because some of those stakeholders may have not exactly in line with you objectives.
How is the ROI calculated, whether it's tangible or intangible? Because when you talk about the strategic alignment, it's at least at very early stages, it's very intangible, right? Financial returns, obviously you have the valuations from your portfolio coming in, you can report it. But how do you actually calculate the ROI on the intangible strategic viewpoints?
It's a $1 million or $1 billion question that you have asked, Rakesh. Okay, and that is the dilemma, or that is the problem of every CVC manager. Okay, because while it is easy to calculate the financial ROI, okay, how do you measure exactly the strategic ROI? Okay. So while everybody within the larger corporation wants you to drive the strategic benefit for the organization, and it drives also, right? How exactly do you measure it? Okay. There are not very many effective measurement tools to the strategic value that you have added, right?
Sure.
That is where, as coming back to my original point, that the life of a CVC manager or setting up a CVC is actually a more complicated business than setting up, So while the managers would try to create, according to their own nature of business, internal frameworks for measuring strategic benefit, okay. But as you and me know, that exactly measuring the strategic benefits is kind of impossible,
Sure.
Because some are tangible. Yes, you can measure it, but there are many which are not tangible. How do you measure it, right? So which I think the larger corporates and their boards, they need to be more sensitive towards this dilemma when they are setting up CVCs. Okay,
Understood.
because what also happens in corporates is, like I mentioned earlier, inconsistency. Okay, so some days some manager internally would say, okay, I want to drive the strategic benefit. Okay, that is the importance. The manager changes, somebody new comes in within the larger corporate. He says, no, 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 no. What are we doing with this money? We need financial ROI more, right? And that is where the CVCs become a complicated story.
So this complication around the ability to calculate the ROI, strategic versus financial, do you think this is one of the reasons why it's probably a little more restrictive for the corporates to come up with a thought process around the CVC or building a CVC?
Oh yeah, definitely. That's the reason I said you asked $1 billion question, because this particular question has kind of impeded the growth of restricted the growth of CVCs. Okay.
Sure.
So yeah, solving this is very important, which is I'm saying that here the onus lies on the board of those companies to be very clear. Okay, if the board is not clear, okay, then the managers down the line will always remain confused. Okay,
sure,
that is where it gets killed.
Sure, interesting point. Now, from the structuring part of it to the operating side of the CVC, what do you see as the operating structure of a corporate venture fund, and how the split is between hiring people from outside or promoting people from inside versus outsourcing it completely?
Good. So again, I think you're asking all the right questions, because that is the very essential questions or the ingredients required to understand this space. Okay. See, let's start from understanding that CVCs are a subset of the VC world.
Correct.
So you rightly pointed out, your biggest challenge is how to structure it, and within that, how do you get the right talent? Because without right talent, the CVC is useless. As you know that in investing world, the talent is everything, right? Now, because CVCs are a subset of VCs, and they have a narrowly defined agenda. Okay. The talent in the market feels restrictive in joining it. Okay. Let's say I'm an automobiles major. Okay. And I want to set up a CVC focused on auto technologies. Okay. Now, I may want to do that. Okay. But when I'm hiring talent to work on that, the talent will think that, oh, my sector is going to be restricted, right? Secondly, my ROI objectives are going to be restricted. So it's not that he's going to play in the open professional ocean as such, right? His landscape is going to be restricted, right? And that is why many people would maybe at least in the initial stages of their career, not be too excited about working for a CVC, because then the CVC's objectives would also be governed by the objectives of the larger corporate. Okay, their remuneration structures, like I said, for example, how many CVCs would have the same kind of carry structure as a financial has, right? So all these things make up this problem, that the question that can you find the best talent, or can you attract the best talent for CVCs? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And many times we see that in CVCs, there are people pulled in from internal operating domains, okay, which is good in one way and not good in another way. Okay, again, depends on your objective. So many times when people ask me, so is it good to go to CVCs to raise money, or is it good to work for CVCs, or is it to set up CVCs? So I say it is, the answer to that question is like finding the spouse. Okay. Now, there's no definitive answer, So if you find a spouse, okay, whose objectives and aspiration in life is aligned to yours, your life will flourish. It will go very well, right? But if you get engaged to a spouse whose objectives and vision of life is very different than yours, then you're in a soup, right? Yeah. So the same thing applies to the CVCs also.
No, that's a very interesting point and analogy that you brought in. And what is very evidently noticed in the CVC world is that the VC arm of the corporate it generally rolls into the either the corporate strategy or the M&A's business or the function of the business.
Yeah.
Is that the right alignment? Because I think the objective of the corporate strategy M&A is very different. It's not just investment. I understand that the money goes in there,
yeah.
But how they see at a deal versus how a VC should be looking at a deal is very different. But it's very prominent structure where the CVC generally rolls into the corporate strategy arm.
Yeah. So as I was saying, like, so it would depend on the objective and the need. So for example, even from the ventures perspective, okay, so should you do a CVC or not, right? So if your business is like this, that you can get benefited from the infrastructure of the CVC, okay, that you ride on the infrastructure of the CVC and it suddenly grows, so then it's good for you to go to CVC, even get an M&A done or whatever, right? But if your venture is all about disrupting the existing technology of the CVC, right? And on the board of that CVC are operating people from that larger corporate, right? Who would anyways have the myopic view to preserve their operating infrastructure rather than getting it disrupted, right? Then perhaps it's not such a good fit for you,
Sure.
So I'm saying that every case, so you cannot paint it with the same brush, in every case you will need to evaluate on both sides, on the CVC side as well as the venture side, what is my objective and how is this arrangement going to benefit my objective?
Yeah, no, I think that with the whole conversation that we had so far, it's very clear and evident that unlike a VC where it's straightforward, I take money from my LPs, I invest in high growth startups.
Yes.
I get 30, 35, 40% IRR, return it back to my investor, make good hurdle and carry for me and my team, and that's it. I go for the next fund. Yes. With CVC, with every CVC, every corporate, it's a different reason.
Absolutely.
Right. And that's what I understand you say. It makes it a little more complicated. And why the CVCs have been slow entrants in the market.
Correct.